Hello and welcome to Sim.bc, where it right now is 17:30, so just half past 5 in the afternoon, or sorry, in the evening. In the evening is probably a better word, sorry. And today is one of those days, when I'm kind of sluggish in a way. Not because I'm having a headache or anything like that, just because sometimes you need to go up early, and I can say that the time delay from me going up at my normal rate to me going up today because I had a meeting, well, the difference there in time was easily 6 hours. Yeah, so for me, I've been up at the regular time today, but it feels like I was up in the middle of the night, and it's got awful. It is awful. Because, my body isn't used to it. Is that a bad thing? Yes, it's my own fault. Yes, most definitely it's my own fault. Is it something that I can work on and do better? Yes, it is. But still, it is how it is. So if I might seem sluggish, or if the energy is out there, not just because we're going to talk about numbers and stuff like that, that might probably be why. And yesterday I had a bit of a bad day as well. Not that I'm going to go in and complain about that for the rest of the video. Just gonna say that I didn't feel like the video I produced yesterday was 100%, at 110% as I want them to be. No, because I was talking about a topic that I feel quite strongly about. The elevator pitch is something that I find is really interesting, and that is actually a part of today's video as well. Ish, in a way. And it's something that I was just so fired up about talking about, so I might cover that in the future as well, because yes, after reviewing yesterday's video, I sat there and I was like, dude, really, you can make so many better things through it. And isn't that part of the learning journey after all? You need to rework all the things you've done, and once you've finished, you work it through, you review it, and you realize that, oh my days, I thought I was supposed to get the keys to heaven. Turns out I wasn't quite there yet. But that is not why you're here now, is it? No, you're not here to listen to me complaining about my day, to complain about yesterday's day. No. You're here because we're talking about a founder's problem. And something that I've been talking about, something I've been discussing, and something that I've been obviously pointing out over the course of all of these videos we made. I think I mentioned it at least once in every video. And no, that's not or something like that. I've been talking about the formal things that you need to prepare in order to get an investment from a formal institution. And what are these, formal things that you need to prepare? Well, it is such things as financial summaries, as the income statement, the cash flow statement, and the balance sheet. 3 very key things that we're not going to go through today, but that we might cover in the future. That is all about accounting, and I would argue that it's not my biggest area of neither interest nor experience or expertise, so we might cover that in the future. I have been talking about them in school, I have been studying them, I've been on the top of my field, yeah, or at least that's how I felt when it came to accounting and these 3 things. However, talking about it 2.5 years later, I might add that I might not be as sharp, so I think I will revise those things and take them up in the future maybe. But instead of talking about that, we're going to talk about something that is equally as important, which is the business plan. Now that we have covered the elevator pitch, no matter how bad or good it was, that's up to you, am I right? But I just felt like I could have done it better. Anyway, might cover that future again, as I said. But today we're going to talk about the business plan. 3 key parts that makes up the business plan, or at least in my opinion, and at least in my experience, and why it is important. Well, to start off and to kick off, the business plan is basically going to be, the plan over your business. It's going to be everything that covers it. And one can argue that the financial statements are going to be in there, and yes, they will be in there. And yes, I have made them quite recently, actually, when I was in Bordeaux, when I was in France, but still wouldn't argue that I'm an expert in them enough to actually talk about them. And I hear what you're saying. Neither are you in the topics that you're discussing. Funny. No, but we're actually just going to go through the business model quite generally. And the business model, well, quite generally, is your entire business. It is the plan for your business. It's what's your ideas, what's your competitive advantage, who are your competitors, who are the suppliers, who are you going to pitch this to people. Even the elevator pitch is part of the business plan. The business plan is basically covering everything, yeah? in your business from top to bottom, yeah, from tip to toe, taking in everything into consideration and just stating it out. I mean, the easy and the very general business plan that we made for, well, school purposes or for educational purposes was 64 pages long. Now, to put that into perspective, we worked on this for, well, effectively for a month, but over the course of 6 months, because we had other, well, stuff to do as well, other hand-ins in the same course and other courses at the same time. But when you're a business, yeah, when you're a startup, you kind of need to have this under control, and yours is probably going to be way longer than 64 pages. Obviously, this is based on how precise your language is and how big of an idea you have and how long you've gotten and how far you've gotten on your journey on so far. But one can argue that the average startup would probably need somewhere around, I would say minimum 60 to 70 pages, maximum, I don't know, there probably isn't a limit. But the full executive, what you would say, a business plan is probably going to be somewhere along the lines of 150 to 200 pages. Just keep that in mind. If you think you're done after 20, you probably haven't covered it all. So what are the 3 things that I think that you should cover in your business plan? Oh, I'm feeling this might be a long video. It might be a short one. We'll see when we get going. Well, I would argue that you should put in a non-disclosure agreement. Not one of the 3 key points, but if you just put it in there, because there's nothing more boring than handing out your executive summary, handing out everything, your business plan, all of your details you have of your business, of your startup that might not have any legal support, and then you come back and they say, well, we've come up with a similar idea, and you're like, well, how? You hadn't last time, and they're like, one can say that we had a bit of inspiration from reading your stuff, and you're like, but that's my idea, and they're like, yeah, but it wasn't patented, now was it? And it wasn't any non-disclosure agreement in there either, so now we own it. So put in a non-disclosure agreement and a, well, what should we say, confidentiality agreement, so that they can't share it to anybody who's not supposed to have the information, and make sure that your idea is patent pending at least. But going into the 3 points, well, the first one is a micro and macro analysis of the market. This covers everything. So macro analysis is something along the lines of you can do a pastel, politically, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal approach to what does the macro environment look like. You can also go into Porter's 5 forces, talking about threat of new entrants, bargaining power of buyers, bargaining power of suppliers, threat of substitution of products or services, and so on and so forth. And then you need to go into quantitative data and you need to go into qualitative data and quantitative data. Now, in my mind, I could have done that either way, mentioning qualitative data afterwards, but this is the structure I'm having, which is, well, suppliers, customers, and competitors, and quantitative data is more like the demand and the supply, the cross from business that your entire economics idea is surrounding, and that is all part of the macro analysis. Then going into the micro analysis is a bit shorter, but still equally as important, talking about market segmentation, need and expectations of each segment analysis, key success factors of differentiation opportunities, and, well, a summary of the entire section. And this is crucially important, mostly because I wrote this was my part when we were working with it, but identify a segment. It was the same thing I was covering yesterday, or trying to say in that miserable pitch video. Imagine who your key audience is. Find out who your key audience is, and being able to target them. What is the needs and expectations of that segment and of each segment? Because if you're developing something for a specific segment and it turns out that, well, that didn't answer the need to that segment at all, but then you're looking around and saying, well, they need this. We apply it there instead. That could be a possible solution. Now, it's not optimal, but, you gotta work with what you gotta work with, am I right? And then, just for fun, so you can conclude the macro and micro analysis if you want to be a nice lad, yeah, for your audience. The next is going into the business model. And yes, again, I'm saying all of this is the business model, but for some reason, this was just called the business model. I would say that this is more your comparative and competitive and more, comparative and competitive advantages, your marketing strategy, well, your financial background, things that surrounds your business more so than your, what should we say? The previous part is more about your competition and your customers. This is more surrounding the actual business. These could be things like competitive advantage, marketing model, social model, financial model, technical model. So stuff like, how are we actually working within the organization when pushing down decisions? Is it a top to bottom communication? Is it a flat organization? Is it a tall organization? Is it very democratic? Is it a very democratic perception that we have in the business? Is it very authoritarian? How do we actually work here? What is our competitive advantage? What is that we're actually supplying people here? Yet again, probably something that you can take from the microanalysis. Look at the marketing model. What does it look like? Social model might be even more crucial to your business. And then the financial model, of course, is where kind of the idea where your financial summaries got to get in. The cash flow statement, the income statement, and the balance sheet, which is yet again so boring, but it needs to be there. It is important. It's probably going to, well, I would argue, a well-structured financial summary could easily sway investors in relation to that, you know, who you're actually targeting with your idea. That should be superb as well. Those 4 or 5 things, depending on how you see it, crucial, mate. I mean, so crucial. And then you're going into your executive summary. And even though it says summary, it's quite a lot of work. So we're looking at description of the company, which is basically what you've been done previously. Your product and service, actually specifying what the product and the service is. Your market analysis, this is going to be your, well, your macro and micro analysis combined with your, well, what you would say the marketing structure of your the previous part. Different marketing strategies that you can apply to the market that you've announced and that you've seen. Organizational and management structure within the corporation, which is again leaning on the social and technical approaches in your own business, and applications of effects of loan and investments. And this is only about the idea that if you've been taking an investment or a loan in the, well, previously, how is that payment plan looking right now? Are you able to meet the payment plan, or are you actually going out looking for investors in order to pay off your loan and your debt? Because that is arguably not the position that you want to be in. So make sure that, but if you do it, you don't want to hide that from your investors, because that can cause all manners of legal problems. So you want to be very upfront with what your financial situation looks like, even though many people will argue that, well, no, lie, because that's how you get investment. No, don't do that. That only creates problems down the line. More often than not, it does, I would say. So be upfront with that, but try to sell it simultaneously. Now, the best thing would be if you have some of your own capital invested in the company and not any external factors that can actually pressure you for actually paying off the loan, and hence needlessly need to force sell your company and your shares in your company. Looking at other important things in this section is important assumptions that you have made regarding the, well, the market out there. What are the assumptions that you've made when you collect your data, your surveys, your interviews, in order to, evaluate the target segments? What kind of assumptions have you made? Is it maybe that they're using iPhones, maybe that they're using smartphones, maybe that they're using Samsung phones, and so on and so forth? Now, that might not at all be important to your research when it comes to identifying the correct population and the correct segment, but just an idea. Perhaps if you're developing an app, what kind of phone are they using? How many are actually using smartphones in that demographic? So what kind of assumptions are you making when you're analyzing your target segment? Startup costs. I don't know how to state this to make it sound equally as important as it is. But startup costs and source of funds and your projections in the future and your break-even analysis and your estimated returns kind of needs to be separated from your, well, not separated completely, because they should be in the financial summary, but they should really be highlighted in the rest of the business model, at least somewhere, so that they're easy to find, because no one want to have this information overflow and just look through all of your numbers, all of your figures, yeah, and be trying to find where your break-even point is. Now, this is something that you clearly want to define together with your startup costs, which is, and again, intertwined with your break-even analysis, and talk about your projections, which will nicely lead into estimated returns in the future, because that is what investors are really interested about. Moving on then, because that is really important. I don't know how I can state that even more without reiterating the same point that it is important. Most of the things are important, but those are really key. A third thing that you can think about within this target is evidence of market research. Yet again, the idea that you've actually made your research. Well, this is where your important assumptions also rolls in. Price lists. What are your prices going to be if you're making a product? What are the products going to be? Are they going to be different kinds of products? If you're having a service, is it going to be a premium service? Why not? And so on and so forth. Is people actually going to buy this? Do you have any empirical evidence for that people are buying this already, or for that people will buy it? Are people interested? Why not? Things that should be in part of your, well, marketing segment analysis. And this is, yeah, sample and promotional material. You need to have some form of promotional material, probably not just in order to convince investors, but to show investors that you can convince other people about what you're actually doing. And it is kind of a neat thing to have when you're actually, convincing investors. Maybe a short commercial that you've done by yourself, highlighting the top and key things, showing that you as a person are resourceful. And talking about you as a person, you probably need to state the CV of all of the key members behind the team who are going to be involved and talk about how it's going to be to actually start up this business. Who is it that's actually behind your startup? Who is actually behind your company? I mean, is it only you? Do you have the relevant experience? Do you have the relevant education? Why should we invest in you? Do you have anyone else who is actually splitting the costs and the responsibility with you? Why not? I mean, how can we evaluate this as a possible investor? How can I evaluate that all of the things that you put forward, how do I know that you know them? How can I trust you? So it's yet again important to pick out the CVs of the key members of the team, yeah? Because let's say that you have a very ambitious startup and you already sought investment, or you're already started, you're a year in, yeah? Still considered a startup though from your perspective, and you're going to seek investment, but you have a team of 20 to 30 people already, which you think is quite, well, you believe that you're still in the startup phase, but then you go to a investor and they're thinking, well, this is all good, and you provide a CV or the resume for all of your employees and all your workers. Now, first of all, that might not be beneficial, because they might not know who is on which position. Even if that is clear, they might say that you've employed that person, I wouldn't do that, things like that. So what you want to do is find the key people in your organization. Now, arguably that could be only you, nothing wrong with that, or potentially it is. Probably you want to have a partner if you're seeking external investment, but that's a discussion for another point. Or at least this business plan should have made it crystal clear for the investor why they should invest in you alone, or why they should invest in you too. Probably better if you two, because yet again, splitting responsibility, splitting profits and all that. Not splitting profits, but splitting the responsibility and the idea creation and the workload. But people should be able to quickly realize who is behind the team. And then obviously some references to different, sources of data that you've made. Might be the academic part of me is coming out and saying, have sources, but it is important. I mean, if you just go out there and state something, they're going to ask, is it your idea? Is that what you think? And you're like, yes, that's what I think, but actually, it wasn't I who said it, yeah? So it's important yet again carry over these fundamental things when it comes to the academic world into the business world, not because people will necessarily view it, but just so that you don't run into any legal problems in the future yet again. You need to be established with this when you're making a startup, because the least thing you want to have, like the latest thing you want to have, is some sort of big corporation breathing down your neck when you're trying to establish your own startup, and they're like, we said that's our thing. So you're like, oh, shit. So you want to be as explicit as possible when it comes from where you gathered the information, how you gathered the information. And yet again, coming from a context of a university student, yeah, so academic world through and through, I know that. But I would argue that that's important carrying over to the business world as well. So those are the things that you need to probably consider, and these are key things. Keep in mind, these are general things, key things that you need to put in there. If there is anything specific from your business or from your industry that is quite important, you need to perhaps dedicate an entire segment towards that, and actually showing and highlighting that you know about it. Because when it comes to attracting an investor, it's not so much they needing to read through everything and they needing to believe in your idea. It's more that they need to believe in you, that you know what you're doing, because you're the person who's going to handle their money. I mean, do I want to hand over my money to someone who isn't, to someone I don't believe in? I probably wouldn't, now would I? I know. Before we get on any further, this is already long as it is, and well, might have become a bit rambly, but it's just so many things that you need to keep into consideration when making a business model or a business plan. So just restating them quite quickly. I'm talking micro and macro analysis, crucially important. And then we're talking the business model, or rather the company model. Yeah, sounds better. The company model, everything in your company that makes sense to cover, which is the competitive advantage, marketing model, social model, the financial models, all of the financial models, and the technical model. And then the third thing is the executive summary. Putting it all together, yet again, it's not just a summary for summary's sake. It might be really large and you might need to add some sufficient things to it. And yet again, going to point out, startup costs, source and use of funds, projections, break-even analysis, and estimated returns, together with establishing and identifying your target market, and selling in your idea yourself, and for them to believe in you. You know, there are quite a lot of things to take away from here, but from all the 20 or 30 or 50 points that we covered here in the general, and I'm not even gonna do general, it is the general business plan. Those are the, well, what did I do? 7 or 8 key points that I really believe you should focus on more than anything else when it comes to the actual meeting with the person or the the formal institution of investment that you're seeking. So this could be venture capitalists, they could be angel investors, or they can be banks. Because when you go to your family or friends, which I argue that you wouldn't, because, you know, mixing family and friends and money, not that good of an idea from my perspective. Other people might have a different take on that, but from my perspective, isn't a good thing. Now, it probably wouldn't hurt for you to have this business model and laying it on them and say, well, you can read through all of my ideas right here. I have all the information right here. It probably wouldn't hurt to have that when talking to them, but arguably, would you need it though? I would say you probably wouldn't, because they probably believe in you so much that they invest anyway. But this is yet again for the more formal institutions of investments. You will be needed to have this. So keep that in mind as a startup, because this is yet again the boring backhand side of making a startup. Actually needing to sit down and just imagine that you're in school again and doing all of these seemingly academic things that is actually going to help you when, well, seeking investment in the future for your actual real life project. And I know, been talking for way too long. So have a nice one, mates, and I'll see you tomorrow.